Well, greetings fellow dwarfers. Today we're going to be taking a look at a classic episode, Stasis Leak. This is one of my episode breakdowns. I haven't done one of these in ages. So, if you haven't seen one before, the idea here isn't just to give you a shot-by-shot breakdown of what we see on screen, but also to include details of deleted scenes, behind-the-scenes stuff, the remastered editions, and, well, other information that you might not know if you just watched the original episode. So today we're looking at Stasis Leak, a brilliant episode this one, which saw the return of Captain Hollister, Peterson, Kochanski to Series 2. There's a lot, and I do mean a lot of things here to talk about with regard to continuity, theories and speculation, so let's dive in. I'm going to be dashing through the main plot points quite a bit here, as there is just so much to discuss. The opening gag for the episode is the moon, shaped exactly like Felicity Kendall's bottom. This was changed to be Marilyn Monroe's bottom in the remastered version, presumably to be a bit more of a recognisable name internationally. We're then straight into a flashback scene from before the radiation leak. It's all in black and white to emphasise the flashback nature of the shot, a similar vibe to how we got the black and white black box footage in the previous episode, thanks for the memory. So, pre-accident or past Lister and Rimmer are in the captain's office. Rimmer's explaining how Lister gave him freaky fungus, a space equivalent to magic mushrooms. I love the general vibe of this scene, how all three are playing off each other, and how there's a strong character trait on show for each one of them. Like Lister, with his feet up, not taking it too seriously, though still actually calling the captain Sir, which is a nice link to how he spoke to the captain in the first episode, The End.
I do respect you, sir. No, sir. I'm sure it was only one egg.
After a few gags, Lister is given 2 weeks punishment duty, which Rimmer thinks is excessively lenient, before losing his rag and shouting at the captain. I really like how this episode used a punishment duty, painting the outside of the ship, to nicely link to the opening credits where we see Lister doing just that, painting the outside of the ship. It's great to see that referenced and actually shown in an episode. Out in the corridor, the boys are discussing what just happened, and it's really nice to see people in the corridors and hear the general hubbub of an area of activity. It's a real striking contrast to the empty, lonely post-radiation leak feel. And it's interesting how this episode kind of reminds us just how much the boys have lost. Talking in the corridor, it sounds like Rimmer got somewhat violent with Hollister, landing himself 8 weeks of PD. But typically Arnold has absolutely no awareness of his own cock-up, or if he does have any awareness, he's trying his absolute best to blame everybody else. Whilst using the famous early series vending machine, they're passed by who we'll later discover is the future dead hologrammatic version of Rimmer. In the bunk room, the hologram Arnold appears as a head in the table, freaking out the living Rimmer. He tries to tell some details of how he's got there, but the living Rimmer is a bit too freaked out to take very much in. We then go full colour and transition to the 3 million years in the future version of Red Dwarf. I've always loved the ship flyby transitions. They're usually used to show the passing of time, but to use one effectively to show 3 million years going by, well, that's impressive. Lister is reading Rimmer's diary, which he immediately admits to write to Rimmer. We get a joke of Rimmer sending secret love letters to Carol McCauley. Rimmer then admits that he's read Dave's diary, but he did it sneakily behind his back. Lister reveals that he's reading it for a reason, that being he's found a mysterious picture of himself marrying Kochanski when he looked through Kochanski's quarters. Lister comes up with the idea that Rimmer's apparent hallucination of seeing his own head coming through a table wasn't a hallucination at all, but was in fact the real appearance of his hologram future self, with the diary revealing that the head in the table said to him that they found a stasis leak on floor 16. Holly doesn't know what a stasis leak is, so the guys decide to go check out floor 16 for themselves. The ship is so massive that they have to take an express lift down to floor 16. It's such a long journey that there's actually a flight attendant video giving them safety information. Except it reveals that there really is no safety precautions, as you're just going to die if anything goes wrong. Comforting. Now that flight attendant safety video going down 2,567 floors to floor 16 is really important, as it gives us one of the only decent floor counts for Red Dwarf, with 2,567 plus 16 giving us a minimum floor count for Red Dwarf of 2,583. I did a whole ship-sized theory video, in fact a whole ship-size series, based off that count up. They eventually arrive at floor 16 and the cat complains about the food on the journey. They then find the stasis leak, which Lister tests out, discovering that it leads to a gents' shower room on Red Dwarf, but 3 million years back in time, before the radiation leak that wiped out the crew. Once they all go through, Lister and Rimmer try to explain what they think a stasis leak is to the cat, but he ends up just calling it a magic door. Now, really intriguingly, Lister says that a stasis room freezes time, and if you have a leak, it must preserve whatever it's leaked into, and it's leaked into this room, the shower room. There are some fascinating details about how stasis works here. Pure speculation, and I've no evidence for this, but if there are only 2 stasis pods, and one of them was occupied by Lister for 3 million years, does that mean that the spare stasis pod, the one that's leaking, if it's leaking, is it faulty, so it wouldn't preserve you for 3 million years? Meaning that even if Rimmer had convinced his past self to go into stasis, he might have still died in the booth anyway and still wound up as a hologram. This is an interesting thought.
Fatality.
In fact, that thought could get even worse, as Rimmer could have unknowingly gone into the good, non-leaking booth, leaving only the leaking one for past Lister, which he's about to get thrown into in a few weeks for smuggling the cat Frankenstein on board. If he goes into the one that leaks, it means that Lister would effectively get killed. That would create a huge paradox, where Lister wouldn't survive into the future, so likely he'd never be there to suggest that they go check out the radiation leak on floor 16 in the first place, so no one would have gone through the stasis leak and Rimmer wouldn't have saved his past self. The perfect paradox. Also, and I said there's going to be a lot of theory and speculation in this one, also no explanation is given to how Rimmer's hologram image is being projected through time. Additionally, the Hollywatch still works later in the episode. I suppose you could explain this simply as the signals are also able to fly through the stasis leak door and communicate with the light being the Hollywatch. Whilst Lister is in the shower room, we can see the clock on the wall, which very clearly makes the date as the 2nd of March 2077, which is awkward for Red Dwarf, given that almost every later reference to the year puts the time of Red Dwarf's original voyage to be about 100 or so years later than that. For example, in Ouroboros, Lister is found as a baby under a pool table in 2155, 78 years after the date on the clock. Oh well, perhaps when the ship was first built, the JMC cheaped out and installed clocks that couldn't count high enough, so everybody just knows to ignore the year on the clocks on board. Maybe. Anyhow, back to the episode. The boys test out whether they can bring anyone back through the stasis leak by using a bar of soap, only to discover that they can't, it just gets turned to powder. We then get a bunk room discussion, with Lister thinking of the idea that he could go back and stay with Kochanski, even though he knows he'd be killed by the radiation leak just a few weeks later. This is a great bunk room discussion, I always love these. We get funny stories of Rimmer buying a topic bar without a hazelnut in it, Lister's story of his friend who had to move away, and Rimmer's story of his pet lemming that bit him. Lister then has the realisation that you could bring somebody back in the spare stasis booth, but while Lister is thinking of bringing Kochanski, Rimmer is thinking of bringing himself. We then get another ship flyby to what presumably is the next morning, where Lister is getting ready to go back through the stasis leak to meet Christine. The cat arrives and is horrified that he's going to have to wear a boiler suit, and they discuss that Rimmer must have sneaked off in the night sometime, probably to go save himself. Holly is in watch form here. Now, as mentioned, there's no explanation given as to how this works through the time gap, but also no explanation is given as to why Holly can be on something so tiny compared to the huge TV set on wheels that we saw in Better Than Life and will see again in Queeg. My guess is he needs the TV set if he wants to wander around independently. I can't come up with any other explanation. They then head back through the stasis leak again and bump into the nude guy having a shower. This was actually filmed twice. If you go check out the deleted scenes, there's a whole nother version with a different actor on a different set. The shower scene actually broadcast was filmed in a real shower room somewhere in BBC Manchester. Interestingly, in the remastered version, most of the nude shower guy's ass is framed out. I guess to make it a little bit more family friendly. We then see the brilliant Mark Williams as Peterson, trying to impress a couple of women. I love the location that they used to film this. It looks brilliant with all those tanks stretching off into the distance. Looks like something from a J.J. Abrams Star Trek. It's a shame you didn't get to see this for a bit longer in the episode actually, it looks really cool. I did a little bit of digging, but I can't figure out exactly where this location was filmed. I'm guessing maybe it's just the heating boilers underneath BBC Manchester, but if anyone knows for definite, then let me know in the comments. Sadly, this is the last on-screen appearance that we've ever had of Peterson in Red Dwarf. At least so far, who knows what the future holds. The cat mentioned that he's never been this close to women before, which kind of confirms the virgin status later referred to in Series 11's Can of Worms. Future hologram Rimmer passes the old Lister and Rimmer in the corridor, just like in the intro. Well, almost, as he never checked over his shoulder in the intro version. Hologram Rimmer's head then appears in the bunk room table once again. However, this time, the line, "That wasn't so bad, was it?" is cut out, presumably just to keep up the pace of the episode. Captain Hollister arrives dressed as a chicken, and past Rimmer believes him to be a drug-induced hallucination, throwing paint over him before beating him up a little bit. Future Lister and the cat arrive at Kochanski's quarters, where her roommate tells them that they can find Christine at the Ganymede Holiday Inn. We then find ourselves in a massive hotel lobby, where we first get a close-up of a silver-faced android. For some reason, this close-up was cut in the remastered version. I really don't know why, unless perhaps that plaque was copyrighted for the Holiday Inn. Maybe? In the lobby, Dave is sat on top of a reception desk, as you do, asking where he can find Christine, while the cat meets a talking suitcase and attacks a woman wearing a fox scarf. In reality, this is the Midland Hotel in Manchester, which wasn't closed for filming, meaning that there are real guests in the background of some of the shots. Lister and the cat arrive at Christine's room to discover that she's already married. In despair, Lister looks again at the photo and believes that the other guy in the photo must have been the real groom, not himself. Interestingly, the picture is slightly different to the one shown earlier, implying that the past, or perhaps the future, is being altered. Something that the Future Echoes episode said couldn't be done. Holly gives a great speech about falling in love with a ZX Spectrum and how it's better to have loved and lost than to have listened to an album by Olivia Newton-John. There is a little bit more to this corridor talk which was cut out. You can find that on the deleted scenes. Kochanski invites them into her suite, which the cat runs into and immediately starts eating her food. Nice. Who I'm calling the Goatee Lister arrives. This is Lister from a further 5 years in the future. Goatee Lister explains that the Prime Lister won't get to marry Kochanski for another 5 years, before going on to give the funny advice about not going to see Run for Your Wife. I've got an entire theory video based around this joke and how it might have ruined Lister's future with Kochanski. The whole scene and many others in this episode is an absolute marvel of analog TV production, with multiple versions of the same actor in the same scene and a door closing wipe that is just amazing considering it was made with 1980s TV tech. We get a ship flyby, and then the past Rimmer is delivered to the bunk room in a wheelchair, whilst the past Lister is asleep on the bunk. Lister is dressed in a spacesuit, pretty much how he is in the opening sequence painting the ship. Again, great to see this shown so clearly in an episode. Past Rimmer clearly thinks he's had a terrible drug-induced episode, when really he did actually accurately see his future self come through the table. Poor old Rimmer. Once again, the future Rimmer pops his head up out of the table, further freaking out his past self, before future Lister and the cat arrive, shortly followed by Goatee Lister and Kochanski. Famously, this is not Claire Grogan playing Kochanski. She'd actually accidentally been sent home already. It's actually the assistant floor manager, Donna Di Stefano, who's cleverly hidden under a big hat. Who I'm calling the Errol Flynn Rimmer arrives and says that, from here, things get a little bit confusing, before the past Rimmer finally can't take anymore, cracks and shouts, "Go away!" Well, there we have it, Stasis Leak, a brilliant one for the sci-fi, time travel, paradox fans out there, and just a brilliant episode in general. There's so much theory and speculation I've covered already, and there's actually even more mind-bending stuff we could go into, but we haven't got time for. Things like whether Kochanski we saw on screen in the very first episode, The End, was she already married to the 5 years in the future Lister? And if so, she must have been pretending to the past Lister to be her normal self, but therefore she must have left the ship just before the radiation leak, but that must have meant that Holly must have falsely identified her pile of dust on the floor. That's a complex one, let's not even go there today. Guys, let me know what you think of this episode, Stasis Leak, and what you think of my silly theories in there. About the time on the clock, about whether or not the stasis booth that's leaking would have killed you, and if so, was there the possibility of a paradox where if Rimmer went into the good booth, he'd have killed Lister? Interesting thought. And let me know your favourite part of Stasis Leak down in the comments below. And tell me where this ranks on your list of favourite episodes. Guys, thank you so much for watching this episode breakdown. I haven't done one of these in ages, as I mentioned, but I am planning to do a lot more of them. I've even bought special DVDs that I'll mention soon that are relevant to upcoming episodes. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Give us a comment down below of anything you want to say, and I'll see you next time, Smegheads.